Cops handcuffed a Black SEAL sniper. Then a U.S. general entered the courtroom to apologize. He stepped in to protect an elderly veteran from being attacked and ended up in chains. Now, this decorated sniper, once hailed a hero, is being painted as a dangerous criminal, all because of the skills that once saved American lives. But behind the courtroom whispers lies a terrifying truth. Someone high up is erasing his past and threatening the one person he loves most, just when it seems all hope is lost. A general walks in full dress uniform, and everything changes. Why was a national hero nearly buried by lies? And what secret did the military try to keep hidden? Until now. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Marcus Washington stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. The crisp white shirt and dark suit felt like a costume, so different from the tactical gear he'd worn as a Navy SEAL. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed down the fabric, and he took a deep breath to steady himself. A soft knock at the door broke through his concentration. "Marcus, you ready?" Keisha's warm voice carried through the wood. "Almost," he called back, giving himself one final look. The alert eyes that had once tracked targets through a sniper scope now showed hints of sleepless nights and buried memories. He opened the door to find his sister waiting, already dressed in her nurse practitioner scrubs for her shift at the VA clinic. Her expression held that familiar mix of hope and concern he'd grown used to seeing. "You've got this," she said, reaching up to straighten his tie, even though it didn't need it. "Remember what we practiced. Maintain eye contact, firm handshake, and let your experience speak for itself." Marcus managed a small smile. "That's what I did for the last 4 interviews, Keisha. Didn't make much difference." "This security firm is different," she insisted, her warm eyes holding his gaze. "They work with veterans. They'll understand what you bring to the table." The drive to Downtown Security Solutions was quiet. Marcus watched the city scroll past, his mind drifting to the classified missions he couldn't put on his resume. How did you explain that you'd saved dozens of lives when the operations were redacted? That your quick thinking had prevented disasters that the public would never know about? The interview started promisingly enough. The hiring manager, a middle-aged man in a polo shirt, seemed impressed by Marcus's military background. But then came the familiar questions. "I see some gaps in your employment history since leaving the service," the manager said, flipping through Marcus's paperwork. "And no civilian security experience?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "My training as a SEAL involved extensive security protocols and threat assessment. I've handled high-stakes situations that required split-second decisions." "Yes, but our clients need guards who can handle civilian interactions, de-escalation, customer service." The manager set the resume down. "We need to know you can adjust to non-combat scenarios." A car backfired outside, and Marcus flinched before he could stop himself. The manager's eyes narrowed slightly, and Marcus knew what was coming next. "Thank you for your service, Mr. Washington. We'll keep your application on file." The rejection felt like a physical weight as Marcus walked to his car. His phone buzzed, a text from Keisha. "How did it go?" He couldn't bring himself to respond yet. Instead, he drove to the small park where he often went to clear his head. The open space and fresh air helped keep the memories at bay. The explosions, the screams, the weight of lives depending on his steady hand on the trigger. It was nearly sunset when he finally pulled into the driveway of the small house he shared with Keisha. She was home from her shift, and the smell of her famous chicken soup filled the kitchen. "I saved your life in Afghanistan," Marcus said quietly as he sat at the kitchen table. "Twice. Can't tell them about it because it's classified. Can't explain that I kept my team alive through 3 tours because the details are redacted." Keisha set a bowl in front of him and took the seat across the table. "I know, brother. But you're more than your service record. You're smart, capable, and one of the strongest people I know." "Don't feel strong," he admitted, stirring the soup absently. "Feel like I'm still fighting a war, just a different kind now." "Then let's get you some backup," Keisha said gently. "The VA clinic where I work has a new PTSD support group. Veterans helping veterans. Will you at least think about it?" Marcus looked at his sister, really looked at her. She'd been his anchor since he returned home, never giving up on him even when he'd nearly given up on himself. Her persistence came from the same place as his protective instincts, a deep, unshakable love for family. "I'll think about it," he promised, and her smile made the weight on his shoulders feel a little lighter. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, the sounds of the city filtered through his window. A siren in the distance made his muscles tense, but he focused on his breathing like Keisha had taught him. In Afghanistan, he'd never doubted his purpose or his worth. Now, in the civilian world, both felt frustratingly out of reach. But as sleep finally began to claim him, Marcus held on to one truth that had carried him through his darkest moments. As long as he had Keisha in his corner, he wasn't fighting this battle alone. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to bridge the gap between the hero he'd been and the man he was trying to become. His last thought before drifting off was of Keisha's words about the VA support group. Maybe it was time to accept that even the strongest warriors sometimes needed reinforcements. Maybe that was its own kind of strength. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the entrance of the downtown Veterans Clinic as Marcus approached the automatic doors. He'd finally taken Keisha's advice, though his steps still felt heavy with reluctance. The sound of raised voices stopped him before he could enter. Around the corner of the building, 3 men in their 20s surrounded an elderly man in a wheelchair. The old veteran wore a worn Marine Corps cap, his weathered hands gripping the armrests as the young men taunted him. "Hey, old-timer, bet that disability check's burning a hole in your pocket," one of them sneered, leaning threateningly over the wheelchair. "Please, just let me pass," the elderly veteran said, his voice steady despite his vulnerable position. Marcus felt his military training snap into place like a familiar glove. His body tensed as he assessed the situation. 3 aggressors, 1 vulnerable civilian, multiple escape routes blocked. The old veteran's wheelchair was backed against the wall, leaving him no way to retreat. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus's voice cut through the tension, calm, but carrying the authority of his years of command experience. The 3 men turned, sizing him up. The apparent leader, wearing a red baseball cap, smirked. "Mind your own business, man. This is between us and Grandpa here." Marcus moved closer, positioning himself between the harassers and the elderly veteran. "I'm making it my business. This man served his country. Show some respect and walk away." "Thomas Rivera," the elderly veteran said quietly behind him. "United States Marine Corps." "Marcus Washington," Marcus replied without taking his eyes off the threats. "Navy SEAL." The man in the red cap lunged forward suddenly, throwing a wild punch. Marcus's combat instincts took over. He deflected the blow and countered with a precise strike that sent the attacker stumbling backward. The second man charged, but Marcus smoothly sidestepped, using the attacker's momentum to throw him off balance. The third man pulled a knife, the blade glinting in the sunlight. Marcus's training kicked into overdrive. In 2 swift moves, he disarmed the man and had him pinned against the wall, the knife clattering harmlessly to the ground. "Stay down," Marcus ordered, his voice carrying the weight of countless battlefield commands. The 3 men lay groaning on the pavement, none seriously injured, but all thoroughly neutralized. "Are you all right, Mr. Rivera?" Marcus turned to check on the elderly veteran, but the sound of approaching sirens made his heart sink. Two police cars screeched to a halt in front of the clinic. 4 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them," one officer shouted. Marcus slowly raised his hands, knowing how the scene must look. 3 men on the ground, a knife nearby, and him standing over them. "Officers, wait," Thomas Rivera called out. "This man was protecting me. Those 3 were trying to rob me." But the police were already moving in on, roughly grabbing Marcus and pushing him against the wall. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into his wrists as an officer recited his rights. "There's security cameras," Marcus said calmly, though his heart raced. "Check the footage. I was defending Mr. Rivera." "Tell it to the judge," the officer replied, leading him toward the patrol car. Marcus caught a glimpse of Thomas Rivera arguing desperately with another officer, trying to explain what had really happened. The 3 attackers were being helped up, already spinning their version of events. As the police car door closed behind him, Marcus thought of Keisha. She'd encouraged him to come to the clinic to get help. Instead, he was heading to jail for doing what he'd been trained to do, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Through the window, he saw Thomas Rivera wheeling himself toward the police officers, his Marine Corps cap still sitting proudly on his head, gesturing animatedly as he tried to tell the truth. But the officers were already taking statements from the 3 attackers, who had transformed from aggressors to victims in the blink of an eye. Marcus leaned back against the seat, the handcuffs a cold reminder of how quickly things had spiraled out of control. He didn't regret stepping in, couldn't have lived with himself if he'd walked away. But as the patrol car pulled away from the curb, he wondered if civilian life would ever make sense to a warrior who'd spent his life running toward danger instead of away from it. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the small interrogation room as Marcus sat handcuffed to the metal table. His wrists ached, but he kept his face neutral, drawing on years of training to maintain his composure. Through the one-way glass, he could hear muffled voices discussing his case. The scene at the clinic kept replaying in his mind. Thomas Rivera's frightened expression, the glint of the knife, the fluid movements that had been drilled into him through countless hours of training. He remembered the lead officer's words as they processed him. Military combat training classifies as a deadly weapon under state law. That makes this aggravated assault. The door opened and a detective in a wrinkled suit entered, carrying a thick file. "Marcus Washington," he read aloud. "Former Navy SEAL. Specialized combat training, multiple deployments." He looked up. "That makes you a very dangerous man." "I was protecting an elderly veteran from being robbed," Marcus said evenly. "Check the security cameras." "We did. What we saw was you taking down 3 unarmed civilians with military precision." The detective leaned forward. "They're claiming they were just asking the old man for directions when you attacked them." Marcus's jaw tightened. The memory flashed again. The 3 men surrounding Thomas, their threatening postures, the cruel smirks on their faces. "They're lying? One of them pulled a knife." "A knife we found on the ground, with only your fingerprints on it." The detective's voice dripped with skepticism. The door burst open and a familiar voice filled the room. "I'm here as his emergency contact." Keisha Washington strode in, her nurse's scrub still on from her shift. Her eyes met Marcus's, filled with worry and determination. "Ma'am, this is an active investigation," the detective started. "And I'm his sister, and a medical professional who understands trauma responses," Keisha cut in. "My brother is a decorated veteran who spent his life protecting others. He needs support, not handcuffs." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Keisha had always been his anchor, understanding him in ways others couldn't. She'd been there through the nightmares, the flashbacks, the struggle to find his place in civilian life. Your brother used potentially lethal combat techniques on 3 civilians, the detective argued. His military training makes this assault with a deadly weapon. So his service to this country is being used against him? Keisha's voice rose with indignation. The same training that saved countless lives overseas now makes him a criminal for protecting an elderly veteran. The detective shuffled through his papers. The law is clear. Combat training elevates the severity of the assault charges. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, another memory surfacing. During his last deployment, he'd used these same techniques to protect a village from insurgents. He'd received a commendation for it. Now those same skills made him a dangerous criminal in the eyes of the law. I want to speak to Thomas Rivera, Marcus said, opening his eyes. He saw everything. He can verify my story. Mr. Rivera has given his statement, the detective replied dismissively. But given his age and the trauma of the incident, his account may not be reliable. Keisha placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. This is ridiculous. You're treating him like a criminal for doing what he was trained to do, protecting those who need help. The charges are serious, the detective continued. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon carries a maximum sentence of 15 years. Given your brother's specialized training, the prosecutor might push for the maximum. Marcus felt the weight of the system pressing down on him. The same skills that had made him a hero in combat now marked him as a threat. The disconnect was staggering. How could protecting someone be twisted into such a serious crime? I want a lawyer, Marcus said firmly, and I want the security footage preserved. All of it. Keisha squeezed his shoulder. I'll call Uncle James. He knows some good defense attorneys. The detective gathered his files. You'll be transferred to county jail for processing. Given your training, you'll be considered a high-risk detainee. As the detective left, Keisha knelt beside Marcus. We'll fight this, Marcus. The system might not understand the difference between protection and aggression, but we'll make them see. Marcus nodded, his military discipline holding back the frustration and anger. The handcuffs felt heavier now, a symbol of how his strength, once celebrated, had become a liability in civilian life. But looking at Keisha's determined face, he knew he wasn't alone in this fight. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd come to the Veterans Clinic seeking help, only to end up in custody for helping someone else. The system that was supposed to support veterans now seemed designed to punish them for using their training, even in defense of others. Rebecca Chen's office was modest but organized, with neat stacks of case files lining her desk. Marcus sat across from her, his broad shoulders tense as he studied his court-appointed attorney. She was younger than he'd expected, but her sharp eyes and focused demeanor suggested experience beyond her years. Let's go through this step by step, Mr. Washington, Rebecca said, opening a fresh legal pad. Tell me exactly what happened at the VA clinic. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped together. I was there for my appointment. As I walked toward the entrance, I saw 3 men surrounding Thomas Rivera, an elderly veteran in a wheelchair. And what drew your attention to them specifically? Rebecca's pen moved steadily across the paper. Their body language, Marcus replied, his military training evident in his precise description. They weren't random troublemakers. They had positioned themselves strategically. 1 behind Thomas's wheelchair, 2 flanking him. Classic intimidation formation. Rebecca looked up, her interest piqued. What makes you say they were organized? Their movements were coordinated. They knew what they were doing. Marcus's jaw tightened at the memory. When Thomas tried to wheel away, they adjusted their position smoothly, maintaining control. One of them kept scanning the area, like a lookout. Rebecca made detailed notes. Go on. What happened next? The leader, tall guy, scar on his right cheek. He bent down close to Thomas. I couldn't hear everything, but Thomas looked terrified. When I approached, I heard them mentioning something about services rendered and payment due. That sounds more like an organized shakedown than random harassment, Rebecca observed, underlining something in her notes. Marcus nodded. Exactly. When I intervened, they didn't act surprised or back down like typical street thugs. The leader gave some kind of signal, and they immediately shifted into attack positions. Rebecca pulled out the police report, her brow furrowing. The report claims they were simply asking for directions when you attacked them unprovoked. That's not possible, Marcus said firmly. One of them pulled a knife, the same knife the police found with my fingerprints on it. But I only touched it when I disarmed him. Rebecca flipped through more pages. The report doesn't mention any defensive wounds on the alleged victims, which is unusual given the level of violence they claimed you used. She stood up and walked to a whiteboard, beginning to list inconsistencies. They claimed you attacked without warning, yet security footage shows you clearly announcing yourself. They said they were just talking to Mr. Rivera, but their positions suggest deliberate intimidation. They reported no weapons involved, yet a knife was recovered at the scene. Marcus watched as she connected points on the board. The knife's positioning in the evidence photos doesn't match witness statements either, she muttered, more to herself than to him. What about Thomas's statement? Marcus asked. He saw everything. Rebecca's expression darkened. That's another inconsistency. The police report includes a brief statement from Mr. Rivera, claiming he doesn't remember the incident clearly. But when I requested the audio recording of his interview, I was told it wasn't available due to equipment malfunction. She turned back to Marcus. Mr. Washington, I think there's more to this case than a simple assault charge. These inconsistencies, the organized nature of the attackers, the missing evidence, something doesn't add up. Marcus felt a mix of validation and concern. So you believe me? I do, Rebecca said, sitting back down. And I'm going to start digging deeper. First, we need to locate Mr. Rivera and get a proper statement. Then I want to review all the security footage, not just the clips the police selected for their report. She pulled out another file. I'm also concerned about how quickly the prosecutor's office pushed to classify your military training as a deadly weapon. That's usually a discretionary call, but they filed it immediately, almost like they were waiting for an opportunity. Marcus absorbed this information, his military instincts telling him they were scratching the surface of something bigger. Those men knew what they were doing, Ms. Chen. They were too organized, too professional. Please call me Rebecca, she said, adding more notes to her growing list. I'm going to file motions for the complete security footage and Mr. Rivera's full medical records from that day. Something tells me our elderly veteran might have seen or known something important. She looked at Marcus with determined eyes. This won't be easy. The system is already stacked against veterans in many ways, and someone seems to be working hard to make you look like the aggressor here. But if we can prove these inconsistencies and find out what those men really wanted from Mr. Rivera... Marcus straightened in his chair, feeling hopeful for the first time since his arrest. Whatever you need from me, I'm ready to help. I know what I saw, and those men were definitely not innocent civilians asking for directions. Rebecca's office had transformed into a war room over the past few days. Papers covered every surface, photos and documents connected by red string on a corkboard behind her desk. She rubbed her tired eyes as she studied surveillance photos of the 3 men who had attacked Thomas Rivera. Her computer pinged with an incoming email. Opening it revealed a series of financial records from a contact at the city clerk's office. As she scrolled through the documents, her eyes widened. Got you, she whispered, quickly printing the records. The paper trail led directly to shell companies owned by City Councilman Vincent Castellano. All 3 of Rivera's attackers had received regular payments from these companies, disguised as consulting fees. Rebecca pulled up Castellano's public record. His polished official portrait showed a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, cold and calculating despite his practiced politician's smile. She picked up her phone and dialed Marcus. "Can you come to my office? I found something important." 20 minutes later, Marcus sat across from her desk, examining the photos she'd arranged. "These men," Rebecca said, pointing to surveillance images of Rivera's attackers. "They're connected to City Councilman Vincent Castellano. They're on his payroll through fake companies." Marcus leaned forward, studying the images. What would a city councilman want with veterans at the VA clinic? Rebecca spread out more documents. "That's what I started investigating. I found similar incidents at VA facilities across the city. Veterans being harassed, intimidated. Many stopped showing up for appointments altogether." She pulled out a stack of medical records. "Look at these numbers. There's been a 30% drop in veteran benefit claims in areas where these incidents occurred. People are being scared away from accessing their benefits." Marcus's jaw tightened. "But why? What does Castellano gain from this?" "Follow the money," Rebecca said, displaying more financial records. "Castellano chairs the committee overseeing veteran services funding. When usage drops, he redirects the unused funds to other projects. Projects managed by companies he secretly controls." She stood up and walked to her corkboard. "But that's just the surface. I've found evidence that some veterans are being pressured into working for Castellano's organization. Manual labor, security work, even drug distribution. They're creating a workforce of desperate veterans who've been cut off from their benefits." Marcus thought about Thomas Rivera, remembering the terror in the elderly veteran's eyes. "What about Rivera? Have you been able to talk to him?" Rebecca shook her head. "He's gone completely silent. When I tried to interview him, he was terrified. Kept saying he couldn't talk, that they were watching. Before I could press further, his daughter showed up and rushed him away." She pulled out a photo of Rivera's apartment building. "I had someone watch his place. Castellano's men visit regularly. They're keeping him quiet." Marcus stood up and paced the room, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation. "This is bigger than my assault charge, isn't it?" "Much bigger," Rebecca confirmed. "Castellano's built an entire network around exploiting veterans. The incident with you and Rivera? I think Rivera was about to expose something. Those men weren't just collecting a debt. They were silencing him." She pulled out one final document. "Look at this. 2 other veterans who tried to report similar harassment disappeared. One was found dead from an apparent overdose. The other is still missing." Marcus stopped pacing. "So when I interrupted them with Rivera—" "You stumbled into their operation," Rebecca finished. "And now they're using your military background against you, trying to paint you as a dangerous veteran who snapped. It's perfect cover for them, discrediting you while reinforcing negative stereotypes about veterans with PTSD." She gathered the documents into a neat pile. "We need to be careful. Castellano has connections throughout the city government. The rapid response to your arrest, the immediate weapons enhancement charge, the missing evidence. He's got people in the system working for him." Marcus nodded grimly. "What's our next move?" "We need to get Rivera to talk," Rebecca said. "His testimony could break this whole thing open. But first, we need to figure out how to protect him. These people have already shown they're willing to use violence to keep veterans quiet." She looked at Marcus with determined eyes. "Are you ready for this? Going after Castellano means taking on a powerful man with a lot of resources. He won't hesitate to destroy you to protect his operation." Marcus straightened, his military bearing evident in his posture. "Those men prey on veterans who serve their country. They're forcing them into crime or driving them away from the help they've earned. I won't back down from this fight." Rebecca nodded, already planning their next steps. The scope of Castellanos' conspiracy was larger than either of them had initially imagined. But they had found their enemy. Now they just needed to figure out how to bring him down while keeping themselves and Thomas Rivera alive long enough to expose the truth. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Assistant District Attorney Sarah Palmer approached the podium. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she faced the jury, holding up a thick manila folder. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "the defendant, Marcus Washington, is not just any civilian charged with assault. He is a highly trained military operative whose combat skills make him a lethal weapon." Marcus sat straight-backed beside Rebecca, his face composed despite the prosecutor's words. Rebecca squeezed his arm reassuringly as Palmer continued. "The state will present evidence showing a pattern of unstable and aggressive behavior during Mr. Washington's military service. His own records paint a picture of a man struggling with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, prone to violent outbursts." Palmer began displaying military documents on the courtroom's projection screen. Performance reviews, psychological evaluations, and incident reports scrolled past. Each one seemed designed to portray Marcus as a ticking time bomb. Rebecca frowned as she studied the documents. Something felt off. She had spent hours reviewing Marcus's service record during trial preparation. These documents didn't match her memory of his file. When Palmer called her first witness, a military records specialist, Rebecca's suspicions deepened. The specialist testified about Marcus's documented history of insubordination and multiple disciplinary actions. During cross-examination, Rebecca approached the witness stand with careful determination. "Could you please read the date on the psychological evaluation in front of you?" The specialist adjusted his glasses. "October 15th, 2019. "And where was Mr. Washington stationed at that time?" "According to these records, he was at Fort Bragg." Rebecca pulled out a different document. "I'm showing you Exhibit C, Mr. Washington's deployment records. Could you tell the court where he was actually stationed in October 2019? The specialist studied the paper, his confidence wavering. "This shows he was in Afghanistan. So how could he have undergone a psychological evaluation at Fort Bragg while deployed overseas?" The courtroom stirred. Palmer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Rebecca pressed on, highlighting more discrepancies, dates that didn't match, operations that conflicted with known deployments, citations for valor that were mysteriously absent from the prosecution's files. During the lunch recess, Rebecca hurried to her office where Marcus waited. "Someone has deliberately altered your service records," she said, spreading out both sets of documents. "They've created a false narrative of instability and violence. The question is, who has enough influence to tamper with classified military files?" Before Marcus could respond, her office door opened. Thomas Rivera wheeled himself in, accompanied by his daughter Maria. The elderly veteran looked terrified, but determined. "I'm ready to testify," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after what they did to your records, son." Rivera revealed how he had discovered financial documents showing veteran benefit funds being diverted through shell companies. When he tried to report it, Castellanos' men had threatened his family. "They're doing the same thing to you that they did to others," Rivera explained. "Anyone who stands up to them gets painted as unstable, dangerous. They've got people everywhere, in the VA, the police, even military records departments. They destroy credibility before anyone can expose them." Rebecca took rapid notes as Rivera detailed the exploitation network. Veterans denied benefits unless they worked for Castellanos' organization. Military records altered to discredit whistleblowers. a systematic abuse of power targeting those who had served their country. "Why come forward now?" Marcus asked gently. Rivera looked at him with tears in his eyes. "Because you risked everything to help me that day, and because I'm tired of watching them hurt good people. They tried to make you look like a monster, just like they did to others. But I was there. I saw a hero who protected me when nobody else would." Rebecca gathered the evidence Rivera provided. "Your testimony changes everything, Mr. Rivera. Combined with these falsified records, we can prove conspiracy and corruption. But are you sure you're ready? Castellano won't take this lightly." Rivera straightened in his wheelchair. "I've been running scared long enough. It's time someone stood up to them. Besides," he smiled at Marcus, "I've got a real hero watching my back now." Rebecca looked at the clock. Court would resume in 15 minutes. She had what she needed to expose the truth: Rivera's testimony, proof of falsified records, and evidence of systematic corruption. Now she just had to present it in a way that would break through Castellano's carefully constructed deception. She gathered her files, her mind already forming a strategy. The prosecution had tried to paint Marcus as dangerous and unstable. Instead, they had given her the opening she needed to reveal the real threat, not from a decorated veteran protecting the vulnerable, but from those who would exploit and silence America's heroes for profit. Rebecca sat at her desk late into the night, surrounded by stacks of documents and her laptop's harsh glow. Her office walls were covered with photos and sticky notes, connected by red string, a visual map of corruption that grew more disturbing by the hour. Her phone buzzed, a text from her contact inside the VA administration. "Check your email. Found something big." Opening her encrypted email, Rebecca downloaded a batch of files that made her hands shake. Internal memos, financial records, and surveillance photos revealed a network far more extensive than she had imagined. "Oh my God," she whispered, scrolling through the evidence. The documents showed how Castellano had placed his people in key positions. A VA benefits administrator named James Morton, who deliberately delayed or denied valid claims, forcing desperate veterans into Castellano's illegal operations. 3 police officers on his payroll who ensured any complaints disappeared. A network of shell companies that looked legitimate on paper but served as fronts for drug distribution and illegal labor operations. Rebecca picked up her phone and dialed Marcus's number. "Can you come to my office right now? This can't wait until morning." 30 minutes later, Marcus stood behind her desk, his face growing darker as she explained what she'd found. "Look at this," Rebecca said, pulling up a series of documents. "Someone accessed your military personnel file 2 weeks before the incident with Rivera. They didn't just alter a few reports. They systematically erased your entire service record and replaced it with a fabricated one." She pointed to her screen. "Your real file shows you received the Silver Star for a classified operation in Afghanistan. You led a mission that saved 37 civilian lives. But in the altered records, that mission doesn't exist. Instead, they inserted false reports of violent incidents and psychological instability." Marcus leaned closer, his jaw clenched. "That mission, it's still classified. How did they get access?" "That's what worried me, too. This level of manipulation required extremely high security clearance. Someone in military intelligence is working with Castellano." Rebecca pulled out a thick folder. "I found similar patterns with other veterans. Anyone who started asking questions about missing benefits or suspicious job offers had their records altered. They were either arrested on false charges or declared mentally unfit for benefits. The system that's supposed to protect veterans is being used to silence them." She spread out surveillance photos across her desk. These show known drug dealers meeting with Castellano's security company employees, all veterans who had their benefits denied. They were given a choice: work for the organization or lose everything. Marcus picked up one of the photos, his expression pained. I recognize him, former Marine. He was at the VA clinic last month, talking about how his disability claim kept getting rejected. Castellanos' organization preys on veterans when they're most vulnerable, Rebecca said. The falsified records serve two purposes. They discredit anyone who might expose the operation, and they create a paper trail that makes it look like these veterans were unstable or criminal before joining Castellanos' network. She pulled up another document on her screen. This is the real kicker. I found evidence of a classified intelligence officer named Gregory Phillips, who has been accessing and altering military records on request. He's been on Castellanos' payroll for at least 3 years. Marcus straightened, recognition flashing across his face. Phillips, he was involved in processing reports from my last deployment. He would have had access to everything. Exactly, Rebecca said. He's the key to proving this whole conspiracy. The falsified records, the targeted harassment, the exploitation network. It all connects through him. Without his access, Castellano couldn't have built this operation. She stood up and walked to her evidence wall, adding new photos and connections. We're not just fighting assault charges anymore, Marcus. We're exposing a criminal enterprise that reaches into multiple government agencies. They didn't just try to destroy your credibility. They tried to erase your heroism because they knew someone with your background and integrity would be a threat. Marcus studied the wall of evidence, his military training evident in how quickly he analyzed the connections. All those veterans, they were targeted because they were vulnerable, because they needed help. And you were targeted because you tried to help them, Rebecca added. By standing up for Rivera, you threatened their whole operation. That's why they moved so quickly to discredit you. She turned to face Marcus, her expression determined. We have enough evidence now to expose everything. The falsified records, the corruption, the exploitation network, all of it. But going public means taking on some very powerful people. Are you ready for that fight? Marcus looked at the photos of veterans who had been victimized by Castellanos' organization. His voice was steady when he answered. Those men and women served their country. They deserved better than being used and discarded. Whatever it takes, we're going to make this right. Rebecca nodded, turning back to her evidence wall. The scope of corruption was staggering, but now they had proof. Tomorrow, they would begin dismantling Castellanos' network piece by piece, starting with the truth about Marcus's heroic service record. The courtroom hummed with tension as Thomas Rivera's wheelchair was guided toward the witness stand. Marcus sat at the defense table, his wrists and ankles bound in heavy restraints that clinked with each small movement. Rebecca stood beside him, her posture alert as she watched Rivera being sworn in. Castellanos sat in the gallery's front row, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn clothing of the veterans who filled the benches behind him. His face remained impassive, but his eyes never left Rivera. Judge Harrison adjusted her glasses. Mr. Rivera, please state your name for the record. Before Rivera could speak, the courtroom doors burst open. 3 men in maintenance uniforms strode in, their movements too purposeful to be routine workers. Marcus's combat-trained eyes caught the telltale bulge of concealed weapons beneath their jackets. Time seemed to slow as Marcus processed the threat. The first man reached into his jacket. The fluorescent lights glinted off metal. Marcus didn't think. He acted. With a sharp twist and pull, he broke free from his restraints, the weak link he'd identified earlier snapping under pressure. People screamed as the first shot rang out, but Marcus was already moving. He tackled Rebecca to the ground just as a bullet whizzed past where she'd been standing. "Everybody down!" Marcus shouted, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of military command. The courtroom erupted into chaos as people dove for cover. Rivera's wheelchair tipped over in the confusion, leaving him exposed. One of the attackers turned toward the fallen veteran, weapon raised. Marcus knew he had seconds to act. His eyes locked onto a bailiff's sidearm, secured in its holster. The officer had taken cover behind the judge's bench, leaving his weapon in Marcus's line of sight. Without hesitation, Marcus rolled across the floor, grabbed the gun, and in one fluid motion took aim. His sniper training kicked in automatically. Time slowed further. He controlled his breathing just as he had on countless missions. The world narrowed to his target and the threat to Rivera. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. The attacker's bullet struck Rivera in the shoulder, spinning him onto his side. Marcus's shot hit the gunman's hand, disarming him instantly. Before the other 2 attackers could react, Marcus had already adjusted his aim. 2 more precise shots, one to a knee, one to a shoulder, and the remaining threats were neutralized. The entire exchange had taken less than 10 seconds. "Medical help!" "We need medical help here," Marcus called out, keeping the borrowed weapon trained on the subdued attackers. Blood spread across Rivera's shirt, but the veteran was conscious. His eyes locked onto Marcus with a mix of pain and gratitude. Police flooded into the courtroom, weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon," they shouted at Marcus. "Hands where we can see them." Marcus carefully placed the gun on the ground and raised his hands. "Rivera needs immediate medical attention," he said calmly. "Shoulder wound, possible arterial bleeding." Rebecca scrambled to her feet. "Wait!" He just saved everyone's lives. Those men were here to kill Mr. Rivera. But the officers were already forcing Marcus face down onto the floor, roughly cuffing his hands behind his back. Judge Harrison, emerging from behind her bench, tried to restore order to her courtroom. "Officers, I witnessed the entire incident," she declared. "Mr. Washington's actions were clearly in defense of this court and its participants." Castellano stood up, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, while Mr. Washington's intentions may have been noble, the fact remains that he broke free from custody and obtained a weapon. These are serious violations that cannot be ignored." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. "Your Honor, given the evidence we've uncovered about Mr. Castellanos' involvement in a veteran exploitation network, I move to question the timing and nature of this attack." Paramedics rushed in to attend to Rivera, who was still conscious but losing blood. As they lifted him onto a stretcher, he grabbed one of their arms. "Wait," he gasped. "Need to testify. Marcus, he's a hero." "Save your strength, Mr. Rivera," Judge Harrison ordered. "Your testimony will be postponed until you've received medical treatment." The district attorney approached the bench, looking troubled. "Your Honor, regardless of the circumstances, we have no choice but to file additional charges. Escaping custody is a felony, as is unauthorized possession of a firearm by a defendant in custody." Marcus remained silent as additional restraints were placed on him, these ones checked and double-checked for security. He watched as Rivera was wheeled out on a stretcher, as the 3 attackers were taken into custody, as Rebecca argued passionately with the district attorney. The bailiff whose weapon he'd borrowed approached him. "That was some shooting," he said quietly. "Military trained?" Marcus nodded. "Navy SEAL sniper." The bailiff whistled low. "Those were impossible shots. You could have killed them, but you didn't." "Wasn't necessary," Marcus replied. "Neutralizing the threat was enough." Rebecca returned to his side, her face flushed with frustration. "They're adding charges of felony escape and weapons violations. But I'm filing a motion to dismiss based on necessity and defense of others. Your actions saved lives today, Marcus. The whole courtroom saw it." Marcus watched as crime scene technicians photographed bullet holes and collected shell casings. "How's Rivera?" "Stable, but critical. The paramedics say he'll make it." Rebecca touched his arm. He was trying to thank you, even while bleeding. That means something. Means Castellanos getting desperate, Marcus said, his eyes finding the councilman as he spoke quietly with his attorneys. He knew Rivera would expose everything, had to stop him even if it meant shooting up a courtroom. 2 officers approached to escort Marcus back to his cell. As they led him away, he could feel the eyes of every veteran in the gallery following him. Their expressions weren't of fear or condemnation, but of recognition and respect. They had witnessed a fellow veteran doing what they had all sworn to do, protecting others at any cost to himself. The morning headline screamed across every local newspaper. Armed defendant creates chaos in courtroom. Marcus stared at the newspaper through the glass partition of his jail cell, his jaw tight as he read the slanted coverage. The story painted him as a dangerous military-trained operative who had orchestrated a violent disruption of legal proceedings. Rebecca sat across from him in the visitors' area, her usually neat appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and case files spilled from her overstuffed briefcase. "They're spinning it all wrong," she said, spreading out several newspapers. "Look at these headlines. Military training turns courtroom into war zone. Dangerous veteran breaks free, endangers public." Not one of them leads with the fact that you saved Thomas Rivera's life. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. "How is Rivera?" "Stable. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery." Rebecca shuffled through her papers. "But that's the only good news. The prosecution filed their new motion this morning. They're using your actions in the courtroom as Exhibit A in their argument that you're a threat to public safety." She pulled out a document and read from it. The defendant demonstrated not only his ability to escape restraints, but also his willingness to obtain and use firearms while in custody. His military training makes him an unprecedented danger to the community. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "I saved lives." "I know." Rebecca's voice softened. "But District Attorney Phillips is arguing that your actions, however heroic, prove their original point about your combat skills making you dangerous. They're saying you could have waited for law enforcement to handle the situation." "Rivera would be dead," Marcus said flatly. A guard walked past, eyeing them suspiciously. Rebecca waited until he passed before continuing in a hushed tone. "I've been receiving threats," she admitted. "Anonymous calls, cars following me home. Someone broke into my office last night, but nothing was taken. Just papers scattered everywhere. A warning." Marcus straightened, protective instinct flaring. "Castellano." "Has to be. He's getting nervous. The 3 shooters from the courtroom aren't talking, but their connections to him are clear. The problem is, he's using his influence to control the narrative." She pulled out a local magazine featuring Councilman Castellano on the cover, looking appropriately concerned as he spoke about veteran services. The headline read, "Councilman calls for increased security measures after courtroom violence." "He's positioning himself as the advocate for public safety," Rebecca explained, "making speeches about supporting veterans while simultaneously pushing for harsher treatment of dangerous individuals with military training. It's a masterclass in manipulation." Marcus absorbed this, his expression darkening. "The system's rigged against us, against all veterans." The prosecution's updated charges came with a new plea offer. Rebecca hesitated. 20 years, eligible for parole in 15. They're arguing that your courtroom actions prove premeditation, that you were looking for an opportunity to engage in violence. "Premeditation?" Marcus's voice carried disbelief. "I reacted to protect people. That's what I was trained to do. And that's exactly what they're using against you. Your training, your instincts, your ability to act decisively. They're twisting everything that makes you a hero into evidence that you're a threat. Through the glass partition, Marcus could see other inmates being led to visitation. Several nodded respectfully in his direction. Word of his actions had spread through the jail, earning him a different kind of recognition than what the media was selling. "What about the other veterans from the courtroom?" he asked. "The ones who saw what really happened?" Rebecca shook her head. "Most are too scared to come forward. Castellano's network runs deep. The few willing to testify have had their credibility attacked. PTSD diagnoses, minor criminal records, anything that can be used to discredit them." She pulled out one final document, her hands trembling slightly. "There's more. Someone leaked your classified mission records to the press, the falsified ones. Channel 8 is running a special tonight. The dark side of military training, when heroes become threats." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing the small visitor's space. The guard tensed, but Marcus kept his movements controlled, measured. "They're not just trying to convict me. They're using me to justify their whole operation. Make everyone afraid of veterans so no one questions when we disappear into their system." Rebecca watched him move, concern evident in her expression. "The jury pool is already contaminated. Every potential juror has seen the coverage, formed opinions. Even if we can prove the conspiracy, they've created a narrative that's hard to overcome." Marcus stopped pacing, turning to face her. "So even saving lives gets used against me. Protect people, you're dangerous. Let them die, you're guilty of failing to act. There's no winning move." "There's always a way," Rebecca insisted, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "We just need to find it." The guard approached, signaling the end of visiting hours. Marcus sat back down, his posture military straight despite his prison jumpsuit. "Tell Rivera to stay strong," he said. "And watch your back, Rebecca. Castellano's desperate now, and desperate men are dangerous." Rebecca gathered her files, her movements heavy with fatigue. "The truth has to matter eventually, Marcus. It has to." But as she watched him being led back to his cell, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting against more than just corrupt officials and falsified records. They were battling a system that had already decided what Marcus was, a system that could turn even the most heroic actions into evidence of guilt. The guard escorted Marcus down the corridor, past cells filled with men who now regarded him with a mix of respect and wariness. His military bearing remained unchanged, his steps measured and confident despite the shackles on his ankles. Behind him, Rebecca watched until he disappeared around the corner, then pressed her hand against the glass partition, her reflection showing a woman struggling with the weight of defending not just a client, but the very concept of justice itself. Marcus sat in his cell when the guard arrived with an envelope marked legal mail. His hands trembled as he opened it, expecting more case documents from Rebecca. Instead, a single photograph slipped out, and his heart stopped. The image showed Keisha bound to a chair in what looked like a warehouse, fear evident in her eyes. A note accompanied the photo, typed in clean, professional letters. "Your sister's life for your guilty plea. Full confession. No appeals. She lives." Marcus's vision blurred as rage and terror warred inside him. The guard passing by his cell paused, noticing his distress. "You okay, Washington?" Marcus carefully folded the photo, tucking it away. "Need to see my lawyer. Now." Rebecca arrived within the hour, her face drawn with concern as Marcus showed her the photograph and note. She studied them through the visitor's partition, her professional composure cracking. "When was this delivered?" she asked, voice tight. "This morning. Castellano's getting desperate." Marcus leaned forward, his words barely above a whisper. "They have my sister, Rebecca, the one person who never gave up on me." Rebecca spread her files on the small counter. I've already called in favors with local law enforcement who aren't on Castellano's payroll. They're checking traffic cameras, security footage. We don't have time for that, Marcus interrupted, his hands pressed against the glass partition. You know what they're capable of. These people exploit veterans, destroy lives. They won't hesitate to. He couldn't finish the sentence. If you plead guilty now, after everything we've uncovered, Castellano wins, Rebecca argued. The whole system of veteran exploitation continues. Marcus's laugh was hollow. You think I care about the bigger picture right now? This is Keisha. She's all I have left. Rebecca watched him carefully. Give me 24 hours. I have contacts in the FB who... No. Marcus's voice was firm. No more investigations. No more legal maneuvers. I'm not gambling with my sister's life. He pulled out a blank confession form that had been included with the photo. They even provided the paperwork. Full confession to all charges. Agreement to serve my sentence at a facility of their choosing. A private prison, Rebecca realized. One where they can make you disappear. Marcus nodded grimly. Small price to pay for Keisha's life. Rebecca stood suddenly, pacing the small visitor space. This isn't right. We have evidence of conspiracy, corruption, systematic exploitation. Your heroic actions in the courtroom mean nothing if Keisha dies. Marcus pressed his palm against the glass. She's been my anchor since I came home. Through the PTSD, the rejections, everything. I can't lose her. They'll bury you in their system, Rebecca pleaded. Use you for forced labor or worse. Everything we fought for was worth fighting for, Marcus finished. But not at this price. Rebecca sank back into her chair, defeated. Let me at least try to negotiate terms. Some protection, Dash. Marcus shook his head. No negotiations. They were clear about that. He pulled out a pen. I need you to witness this confession. Marcus, please. Rebecca's voice cracked. Give me a few hours. My FBI contact is already... How long before they hurt her to prove they're serious? Marcus's hand was steady as he began writing. I was trained to protect people, Rebecca, starting with my family. Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes as she watched him write. Each word of his confession, another nail in his coffin. The guard stood nearby, pretending not to listen as Marcus detailed crimes he hadn't committed. I'll keep looking for her, Rebecca promised. Even after, I won't stop until she's safe. Marcus continued writing, his military posture perfect even in this moment of surrender. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her. He paused, emotion finally cracking his composure. Tell her she was right to believe in me, that this proves I'm still the brother she thought I was. Rebecca pressed her hand against the glass, matching his earlier gesture. You're a hero, Marcus. No confession changes that. Heroes protect people, he said simply, signing his name at the bottom of the form. That's what I'm doing. He slid the confession through the document slot. Rebecca took it, her hands shaking. I'll make sure this gets to the right people. But I'm not giving up on either of you. Marcus stood, signaling to the guard that he was ready to return to his cell. Keep yourself safe, Rebecca. Don't let them add you to their list of victims. As the guard led him away, Rebecca clutched the confession, watching Marcus disappear down the corridor. His shoulders were straight, his steps measured, a soldier making the ultimate sacrifice for someone he loved. She waited until he was gone before pulling out her phone, sending a quick text to her FBI contact. He signed, 24 hours to find her before they bury him forever. The response came immediately. Teams deployed. Clock is ticking. Rebecca gathered her files, the confession heavy in her briefcase. Outside, rain began to fall, matching the tears she finally allowed herself to shed for a hero forced to surrender everything to save the one person who had never lost faith in him. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as Marcus Washington stood before the judge. His shoulders, usually straight with military bearing, carried the weight of his impossible choice. The morning sunlight filtering through the high windows seemed to mock the darkness of the moment. Rebecca Chen sat at the defense table, her legal pad untouched, watching her client with pained eyes. She had spent the night working her contacts, searching desperately for Keisha, but time had run out. Now she could only witness as a good man sacrificed himself to save his sister. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "I'm here today to—" The heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a bang that made several spectators jump. A tall figure in full military dress uniform strode down the center aisle, medals glinting on his chest, his presence commanding immediate attention. "General Robert Hammond, United States Army," he announced in a voice that filled every corner of the courtroom. "And I'm here to set the record straight about Staff Sergeant Marcus Washington's service record." The judge's gavel cracked against the wooden block. "General Hammond, this is highly irregular. We're in the middle of—" "Your Honor," General Hammond interrupted, standing at parade rest, "I apologize for the disruption, but I cannot stand by while a hero is destroyed by falsified records. I commanded Staff Sergeant Washington's unit in Afghanistan, and I have evidence that his service records have been deliberately tampered with." Marcus turned, his eyes wide with recognition. The general's presence stirred memories of desert operations and classified missions that had been twisted against him in court. "Objection!" The prosecutor shot to his feet. "This is completely improper. We have no verification of this man's identity or authority to—" General Hammond reached into his uniform jacket and pulled out a thick folder stamped with classified markings. "I have here the original, unaltered records of Staff Sergeant Washington's service, including the classified operation in Kandahar province that saved 37 civilian lives. These documents bear my personal seal and signature as his commanding officer." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Rebecca stood quickly, hope blazing in her eyes. "Your Honor, I move that we immediately enter these documents into evidence, and these records were sealed for national security." The prosecutor's face had grown red. "They can't be admitted without proper—" "I have here," General Hammond's voice cut through the chaos, "direct authorization from the Secretary of Defense to declassify these specific documents." He held up another official-looking paper. "Staff Sergeant Washington's true service record must be known. The lives he saved, the medals he earned, all of it was altered to discredit him. I've spent the last 24 hours getting these documents unsealed because I will not stand by while one of my best soldiers is destroyed by corrupt officials trying to hide their crimes." Marcus stood frozen, torn between hope and fear. Every instinct screamed that this could save him, but Keisha's life still hung in the balance. He caught Rebecca's eye, seeing a gleam there that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. The judge studied General Hammond carefully. "Approach the bench, General, and Ms. Chen, you'd better join us. Mr. Washington, please remain where you are for the moment." As they moved forward, General Hammond's bearing remained perfect, but he cast a quick, reassuring glance at Marcus. In that look, Marcus saw the same unwavering loyalty that had characterized their service together. A commander who never abandoned his troops, even years after they'd left the battlefield. General Hammond's voice filled the hushed courtroom as he opened the classified folder. "On March 15, 2019, Staff Sergeant Marcus Washington prevented what would have been one of the most devastating terrorist attacks on civilians in Afghanistan's recent history. The general's weathered fingers traced the official documentation. A local school in Kandahar province had been targeted. 237 children aged 6 to 12 were inside. The terrorists had chosen the location specifically to create maximum civilian casualties and destabilize the region's fragile peace. Marcus stood rigid, memories flooding back as his former commander spoke. The prosecution team shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Staff Sergeant Washington, positioned 2,000 yards away in severe wind conditions, made what our sniper division later classified as near impossible shots. He neutralized 4 threats simultaneously, preventing them from detonating their explosives. Not a single child was harmed. Hammond's voice carried pride and conviction. The mission required absolute secrecy to protect local allies and ongoing operations. That's why these records were sealed. The general turned to face the judge directly. But someone accessed these sealed files, altered them, and tried to paint a hero as a villain. We've traced the digital fingerprints of this tampering directly to Councilman Castellano's network. Rebecca Chen quickly stood. Your Honor, I have here sworn affidavits from 3 members of Staff Sergeant Washington's unit, corroborating every detail of General Hammond's testimony. The judge examined the documents carefully, while the prosecutor's face grew increasingly pale. Marcus watched as years of lies unraveled before his eyes. Furthermore, Hammond continued, while I was gathering these documents, federal agents were moving on Councilman Castellano's organization. They've already located and rescued Keisha Washington. She's safe and on her way here now. Marcus's knees nearly buckled with relief. His sister was safe. The nightmare was ending. The judge's gavel cracked sharply. In light of this evidence, all charges against Staff Sergeant Marcus Washington are dismissed. Mr. Prosecutor, I want your office to launch an immediate investigation into the falsification of these military records. And bailiff, please take Councilman Castellano into custody. Castellano, who had been watching from the gallery, tried to bolt for the door, but was quickly apprehended. His face twisted with rage as officers led him away in handcuffs. The courtroom doors opened again, and Keisha rushed in, running straight to Marcus. Brother and sister embraced tightly, their bond stronger than ever through the ordeal they'd survived. The mayor, who had been observing the proceedings, approached Marcus with an extended hand. Staff Sergeant Washington, on behalf of the city, I offer our deepest apologies. We would be honored if you would consider a position as our new Veterans Advocacy Director. We need someone with your integrity and experience to help prevent anything like this from happening again. Marcus looked at Keisha, who smiled through tears of joy, then at General Hammond, who gave him a proud nod. For the first time since leaving the service, he felt his true worth recognized. Not just as a soldier, but as a protector, a brother, and a man of honor. I would be honored to serve, sir, Marcus replied, standing tall with renewed purpose. General Hammond stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. You never stop being a hero, son. Sometimes the world just needs a reminder of what that really means. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.